Welcome to the Ultimate Sports Blog Podcast. Today is Monday, March 11th, 2019. A lot to get to today. Going to go over all the results from the weekend from college basketball, NBA, and NHL. Spring training as well. Look ahead to tonight's slate and pick important games. It's all college basketball, conference tournaments, games. The regular seasons are over. And then obviously NFL free agency chat at the end and my best bet as well. Let's go to college basketball Saturday. I'm going to go over all the scores. There's a lot of big results as well regarding some bubble teams. Auburn upsets number 5 Tennessee 80-84. Big time win for Auburn. They are 22-9. Tennessee finishes the regular season at 27-4. Chuma Oke had 22 for Auburn and Grant Williams had 25 for Tennessee. Number 14 Florida State defeats Wake Forest 65-57. Florida State 25-6. Wake 11-19. Brandon Childress led Wake in scoring with 13, and Trent Forrest had 11 for Florida State. Number 22 Wofford defeats VMI 99-72 in the SoCon quarterfinal. Wofford 27-4. VMI 11-21. Nathan Hoover had 24 for Wofford, and Butta Parham had 22 for VMI. Seton Hall defeats number 23 Villanova 75-79. Seton Hall is certainly going dancing now. They're 18-12. Villanova 22-9. Miles Powell had 20. Colin Gillespie had 22. Clemson defeats Syracuse 67-55. Clemson 19-12. Syracuse 19-12. Marquise Reed had 24 and O'Shea Brissett had 15. Pitt defeats Notre Dame 56-53. Pitt finally gets a win. They're 13-18. 13-game losing streak is over. Notre Dame 13-18 as well. Trey McGowens had 16 and Nate Lazowski had 23. Providence defeats Butler 83-70. Providence 17-14. Butler 16-15. AJ Reeves had 24 and Ball Jorgensen had 17. TCU defeats Texas 69-56. A huge win for TCU. They're 19-12. Texas 16-15. I think Texas is done. Desmond Bain had 34 and Jackson Hayes had 19 for the Longhorns. Marshall defeats FAU 76-61. Marshall 18-13. FAU 17-14. Gerard West had 17 and Michael Forrest had 15. NEC semifinal. Fairleigh Dickinson defeats Robert Morris 66-62. Fairleigh Dickinson 19-13. Robert Morris 17-16. Darnell Edge had 20 for Dickinson, and Matty McConnell had 17 for Robert Morris. UMBC defeats Albany 62-54 in the America East quarterfinal. UMBC 20-12, Albany 12-20. KJ Jackson had 11 for UMBC, and Malachi DeSouza had 15 for Albany. St. Bonaventure defeats St. Louis 66-57. Bonaventure 16-15, St. Louis 19-12. Courtney Stockard had 20 for Bonaventure, and Tremaine Isabel Jr. had 21 for St. Louis. South Carolina defeats Georgia 66-46. South Carolina 16-15. Georgia 11-20. Chris Silva 24 for South Carolina and Nicholas Claxton at 13 for Georgia. Number 6 Kentucky defeats Florida 66-57. UK 26-5. Florida 17-14. Tyler Harrow had 16 for Kentucky and Kavarius Hayes had 19 for Florida. Number 8 Texas Tech defeats Iowa State 80-73. Tech improves to 26-5 to clinch a share of the Big 12 title as Iowa State drops to 20-11. Jared Culver had 31 for Tech and Lindell Wigington had 17 for ISU. Number 13 Kansas defeats Baylor 78-70. Kansas 23-8, Baylor 19-12. Dedrick Lawson had 23 for Kansas State and Jared Butler had 31 for Baylor. NC State defeats Boston College 73-47. NC State 21-10. BC 14-16. CJ Bryce had 14. Kai Bowman had 14. Mississippi State defeats Texas A&M 92-81. Mississippi State 22-9. A&M 13-17. Lamar Peters had 21 and Savion Flagg had 23 for the Aggies. George Mason defeats George Washington 81-65. George Mason 17-14. George Washington 8-23. Justin Williams had 18 for George Washington, and Jordan Miller had 17 for George Mason. South Alabama defeats Appalachian State 78-71. South Alabama 15-16. Appalachian State 11-20. Josh Ajayi had 26 for South Alabama, and Appalachian State's Justin Forrest had 21. Troy defeats Coastal Carolina 74-67. Troy 12-18, Coastal Carolina 15-15. Zach Cuthbertson had 19 for Coastal, and Alex Hicks had 15 for Troy. St. Francis, Pennsylvania defeats LU Brooklyn 72-64 in the NEC semifinal, so it will be Fairleigh Dickinson against St. Francis, Pennsylvania in the NEC title game tonight. I'll pick it later on the podcast. St. Francis, Pennsylvania is 18-13, LU 16-16. Keith Braxton had 19, and Julian Batts had 19 as well for Brooklyn. Number 11, Purdue defeats Northwestern 70-57. Big win for Purdue. They clinch a share of the Big Ten title with Michigan State. Purdue 23-8, Northwestern 13-18. Disappointing year for them. Carson Edwards had 21 for Purdue, and A.J. Turner had 14 for Northwestern. Georgetown upsets Marquette 86-84. Georgetown 19-12. Marquette drops to 23-8. James Akinjo had 25 for Georgetown. They'll be dancing now. Marcus Howard of Marquette, who should be the Big East Player of the Year, had 28. East Tennessee State defeats Chattanooga 68-64 in the SoCon quarterfinal. East Tennessee State 24-8, Chattanooga 12-20. Trey Boyd III had 21 for East Tennessee State, and David Jean Baptiste had 17 for Chattanooga. UMKC defeats Chicago State 76-61. UMKC 11-20, Chicago State 3-28. Jordan Goss had 17 for UMKC, and Anthony Harris had 15 for Chicago State. UAB defeats Old Dominion 64-50. UAB 18-13, Old Dominion 23-8. Ahmad Kaver had 21 for Old Dominion, and Jalen Perry had 14 for UAB. Southern Miss defeats UTSA 81-48. Southern Miss 19-11, UTSA 17-14. Dominic McGee had 19 for Southern Miss, and Giovanni DiNicolo had 18 for UTSA. UT Arlington defeats Texas State 81-73. Texas Arlington 16-15. Texas State 23-8. Brian Warren had 24 for UT Arlington. Mason Harrell had 13 for Texas State. Oregon State defeats Washington State 85-77. Oregon State 18-12. Washington State 11-20. Trace Tinkle had 26 for Oregon State, and Robert Franks had 37 for Washington State. Ole Miss defeats Missouri 73-68. Ole Miss 20-11. Missouri 14-16. Brian Tyree had 21 for Ole Miss, and Xavier Pinson had 20 for Mizzou. Bradley upsets Loyola Chicago 53-51 in the MVC semifinal, so no Sister Jean in the tournament. That's very sad. Bradley 19-14, Loyola Chicago 20-13. Nate Cannell had 19 for Bradley, and Cooper Kaffis had 14 for Loyola Chicago. Number 2, Virginia defeats Louisville 73-68. Virginia's headed for a 1-seed, 28-2. Louisville's 19-12. Ty Jerome had 24 for Virginia, and Jordan Nwora had 19 for Louisville. Temple defeats number 25 UCF 67-62, so Temple's going to be dancing now. 23-8, UCF's 23-7. Shiz Austin Jr. had 21 for Temple, and Aubrey Dawkins had 36 for UCF. CAA first round, James Madison defeats Towson 74-73. James Madison 14-18. Towson finishes at 10-22. Dwight Wilson had 26 for JMU, and Brian Fobbs had 18 for Towson. Seattle defeats Grand Canyon 83-76 in overtime. Seattle 18-13, Grand Canyon 18-12. Morgan Means had 21 for Seattle, and Carlos Johnson had 22 for Grand Canyon. Oklahoma State defeats West Virginia 85-77. Oklahoma State 12-19, West Virginia 12-19. Lindy Waters III had 19 for Oklahoma State, and Derek Culver had 16 for West Virginia. UL Monroe defeats Little Rock 79-62. UL Monroe 16-14, Little Rock 10-21. Travis Munnings had 23 for UL Monroe, and Ray John Tucker had 17 for Little Rock. Rhode Island defeats UMass 94-75. Rhode Island 16-14. UMass 11-20. Fats Russell at 27 for URI, and Carl Pierre at 21 for UMass. LaSalle defeats Fordham 72-57. LaSalle 10-20. Fordham 12-19. Jared Kimbrough had 14 for LaSalle, and Chuba Ohams had 13 for Fordham. Arizona State defeats Arizona 74-62. Arizona State 21-9. Arizona 17-14. as Sean Miller addressed the crowd after the game and really didn't commit on his future. And something tells me he's out of there and probably won't coach in college again. Arizona, in all likelihood, is headed to the NIT. But disappointing season coming to an end for Arizona. But they'll be back because the recruiting's back to normal after all their troubles from the past. Ryan Luther at 12 for Arizona and Remy Martin at 27 for Arizona State, who I think is headed for the dance, regardless of what happens to them in the the Pac-12 tournament. UNLV defeats Colorado State 65-60. UNLV 17-13. Colorado State 12-19. Chris Clyburn at 20. J.D. Page at 16. Central Arkansas defeats Northwestern State 70-63. UCA 13-18. Northwestern State 11-20. Thatch Unruh had 30 for UCA, and Ishmael Lane had 18 for Northwestern State. Nichols defeats Southeast Louisiana 63-69. Nichols 14-17. SCLA 16-15. Jeremiah Jefferson at 28 for Nichols and Marlene Veal at 17 for Southeast Louisiana. Abilene Christian defeats Incarnate Word 81-52. Abilene Christian 25-6. Incarnate Word 6-25. Jaron Lewis had 19. Augustine Eaton had 13. Georgia State defeats Georgia Southern 90-85. Georgia State 22-9. Georgia Southern 20-11. Kane Williams had 23 for Georgia State, and Isaiah Crawley had 19 for Southern. Colorado defeats USC 73-67. Colorado finishes the year strong. They're 19-11 on the year. USC, disappointing year, 15-16. Evan Batty, 21 for Colorado. They're probably headed to the NIT. Nick Ratchovich had 17 for USC. Maybe the Pac-12 does get a couple surprise teams in the tournament, but I don't think so. I think at most 2, and if Washington or Arizona State doesn't win the Pac-12 tournament, then that'll be a 3-bid league. Very bad year for the Pac-12 because obviously Oregon was down. They didn't have Bowl the whole year. UCLA fired their coach midseason. They were a disaster. USC had a lot of injuries, and obviously we talked about Arizona a little bit. It's because of those 4 teams being disappointments this year, that league really doesn't get the love that it normally would in any other year. And even Oregon State's actually hasn't had a bad year. They're probably headed to the NIT as well as Colorado. But I don't think Oregon State's going to get into the big dance unless they win the Pac-12 tournament. Louisiana defeats Arkansas State 90-87 in overtime. Louisiana 19-12, Arkansas State 13-18. Jakeem Grant had 25 for Louisiana, and Ty Cockfield had 35 for Arkansas State. Xavier defeats St. John's 81-68. Xavier 17-14. St. John's 20-11. Paul Scruggs had 22 for Xavier. Xavier might be a dark horse to get in, depending on how they do in the Big East tournament. But 14 losses is just too much for me. St. John's, probably a bubble team right now because of how poorly they finished their season. But I think wins over Villanova and the sweep of Marquette. And the win over VCU, too. You can't discount that. That was a big win earlier in the year in the non-con. VCU turned out to be good this year. So those 4 wins, I think, will save them from being in the NIT. LJ Figueroa had 20, by the way, for the Johnnies. Hartford over UMass Lowell, 78-70, the America East quarterfinal. Hartford 18-14. UMass Lowell finishes at 15-17. J.R. Lynch had 20 for Hartford. 21. And Abdiah Noel also had 21 for UMass Lowell. Arkansas Pine Bluff defeats Mississippi Valley State 91-57. Pine Bluff 13-18. Mississippi Valley State 6-26. Martavius McKnight at 28 for Pine Bluff, and Dante Scott at 21 for Valley State. Sam Houston State defeats Stephen F. Austin 68-57. Sam Houston State 21-10. Stephen F. Austin 14-16. Josh Delaney at 19 for Sam Houston State, and Shannon Boogs had 17 for Stephen F. Austin. Lamar defeats McNeese 83-58. Lamar 19-12. McNeese 9-22. Josh Nazeker had 20 for Lamar, and Shamarcus Kennedy had 22 for McNeese. Number 3, North Carolina defeats number 4, Duke 79-70. Carolina potentially on the way to a 1 seed, depending on how they do in this ACC tournament. They are 26-5. Duke's 26-5. Kobe White had 21. He had an excellent game. RJ Barrett had 26 for Duke. Number 18, Kansas State defeats Oklahoma 68-53. Kansas State 24-7, Oklahoma 19-12. Kamal Stokes had 19 for Kansas State, and Kristen Doolittle had 14 for Oklahoma. Grambling defeats Alabama A&M 66-58. Grambling 16-15, Alabama A&M 5-27. Prince Moss had 14 for Grambling, and Andre Kennedy had 21 for Alabama A&M. A&M Corpus Christi defeats Houston Baptist 76-69. Corpus Christi 14-17. Baptist 12-17. Kareem South had 21 for Corpus Christi, and Ian DeBoose had 28 for Houston Baptist. Yale defeats Princeton 81-59. Yale 20-7. Princeton 16-11. Blake Reynolds had 20 for Yale, and Richmond Arizgo had 15 for Princeton. Prairie View defeats Alcorn State 98-64. Prairie View 19-12. Alcorn 10-20. Devontae Patterson had 32 for Prairie View, and Troy Crosby had 13 for Alcorn. Penn defeats Brown 58-51. They get the last spot in the Ivy League tournament. They're 19-11. Brown 19-11. Brown's surprising season comes to an end. Unfortunate for that school. Devin Goodman had 20 for Penn, and Desmond Cambridge had 13 for Brown. Davidson defeats Richmond 73-69. Davidson 23-8. Richmond 12-19. John Axel Gudmundsson had 22 for Davidson, and Grant Golden had 20 for Richmond. Arkansas defeats Alabama 82-70. Arkansas 17-14. Alabama 17-14. Daniel Gafford had 29 for Arkansas, and Tevin Mack had 14 for Bama. Wyoming over New Mexico 88-81. Wyoming 8-23. New Mexico 13-17. Justin James had 28 for Wyoming, and Carlton Bragg had 22 for New Mexico. UNC Greensboro defeats Stanford 77-70. Greensboro 27-5. Stanford 17-16. Francis Alonso had 31 for Greensboro, and Robert Allen had 18 for Stanford. Northern Iowa over Drake 60-58 in the MVC semifinal. Big upset there. UNI 16-17. Drake 24-9. A great year for Drake coming to an end. Maybe they'll be in the NIT. Maybe they'll be in the CIT, but they'll be in one of these lower tier postseason tournaments. They had a good year. Wyatt Lujas had 27 for UNI, and Anthony Murphy had 16 for Drake. CAA first round. Wilmington over Alon 93-86. Wilmington 10-22. Alon 11-21. Jeantal Sia had 23 for Wilmington, and Steven Santa Ana had 26 for Alon. Jackson State over Alabama State 82-70. Jackson State 13-18. Alabama State 11-18. Javius McInnes had 19 for Jackson State, and Leon Daniels had 21 for Alabama State. Boise State over Air Force 80-52. Boise 12-19. Air Force 13-17. Derek Olson had 22 for Boise. Lavelle Scotty had 10 for Air Force. Fresno over San Jose State 121-81. Fresno 22-8. San Jose State 4-26. Deshaun Taylor had 37 for Fresno, and Michael Stadman had 21 for San Jose State. Utah over UCLA 92-81. Utah 17-13. UCLA 16-15. Two disappointing teams in that conference this season. Cedric Barfield had 29 for Utah, and Chris Wilkes had 20 for UCLA. Cornell over Dartmouth 66-51. Cornell 15-15. Dartmouth 11-19. Jimmy Boeheim had 21 for Cornell, and Chris Knight had 11 for Dartmouth. Harvard over Columbia 83-81. In overtime, Harvard 17-10. Columbia 10-18. Bryce Aiken had 36 for Harvard, and Patrick Tape had 18 for Columbia. Northern Arizona over Northern Colorado 89-78 in overtime. Northern Arizona 10-20. Northern Colorado 21-10. Bernie Andre had 26 for NAU, and Jordan Davis had 21 for Northern Colorado. Dayton over Duquesne 78-67. Dayton 21-10. Duquesne 19-12. Abdiah Toppin had 19 for Dayton, and Eric Williams Jr. had 21 for Duquesne. Big upset in the Metro Atlantic quarterfinal. Monmouth over Quinnipiac 98-92. Monmouth 13-20, Quinnipiac 16-14. Ray Salamne of Monmouth had 19, and Cameron Young of Quinnipiac had 33. Western Illinois over South Dakota State 79-76. That's another big upset in the Summit League quarterfinal. Ben Pyle had 17 for Western Illinois, and David Jenkins had 29 for South Dakota State. So that's too bad for Mike Daum and the Jackrabbits. So that's a weak spot to be had in that conference bid. That would, because if South Dakota State got in, that would have obviously been a strong, whatever lower seed they were because of Daum's presence. Vermont over Maine 73-57. Vermont 25-6, Maine 5-27. Anthony Lamb had 34 for Vermont, and Isaiah White had 18 for Maine. AEC quarterfinal as well. Binghamton over Stony Brook. That's a big upset. 78-72. Binghamton 10-22. Stony Brook 24-8. Sam Simmons had 26 for Binghamton, and Elijah Olanye had 27 for Stony Brook. Stony Brook had a surprising season. That just a disappointing finish for them. FIU over North Texas 73-58. FIU 19-12. North Texas 20-11. Brian Beard Jr. had 24 for FIU, and Jordan Duffy had 11 for North Texas. Number 9, Michigan State over number 7, Michigan 75-63. Big win for Sparty. They're 25-6. They share the regular season title with Purdue in the Big Ten. Michigan 26-5. Cassius Winston had 23 for Michigan State, and Ignas Bredzikis had 20 for Michigan. Charlotte over Rice 78-70. Charlotte 8-21. Rice 13-18. John Davis had 28 for Charlotte, and Robert Martin had 15 for Rice. OVC Championship game. The first bid of the tournament. Murray State Racers get the first auto bid. They finished the regular season / pre-tournament 27-4. Belmont finishes OVC play at 26-5. Rick Bird and company holding their breath. They're in play for at-large bid because their resume is strong. But we'll see how these bubble teams do in their major conference tournaments, like with the likes of Clemson and Texas and Indiana and all those mediocre teams in those bigger conferences. Florida, Alabama, Arkansas. They're all like in play that could steal a more deserving team in Belmont's bid. John Morant, 36 points. And Dylan Windler had 17 for Belmont. Creighton over DePaul 91-78. Creighton's been playing well. They're 18-13. DePaul's 15-14. Mitch Ballack had 39 for Creighton, and Eli Kane had 19 for Georgetown. DePaul. What am I saying? UC Riverside over UC Davis 71-70. Riverside 10-22. Davis 11-19. Dikembe Martin had 17 for Riverside, and Joe Mooney had 19 for UC Davis. Number 10 LSU over Vanderbilt 80-59. So LSU wins the outright SEC title. Stands the turmoil with Will Wade. I think Wade's going to be fired because of this. And LSU 26-5. Vanderbilt 9-22. I wonder if this will cost Wade the Coach of the Year award in that conference. I think it's either going to be him or Tennessee's Rick Barnes, but I think it will end up being Wade despite all the turmoil. As, like I said, LSU 26-5, Vanderbilt 9-22. Darius Davis had 15 for LSU, and Saban Lee had 16 for Vanderbilt. Southern over Texas Southern 87-77. Southern 7-24. Texas Southern 19-12. Richard Lee had 30 for Southern, and Trayvon Reed had 24 for Texas Southern. Wichita State over Tulane 82-79. Wichita is playing very well right now. 17-13. Tulane 4-26. Dexter Dennis at the buzzer to win it for Wichita. Second buzzer beater within the past couple days. As Samaje Haynes-Jones had 15. It's been 10 days. I'm getting my weeks mixed up. So that was like 10 days ago when they had the buzzer beater win over UConn, and they have one over Tulane. I'm talking about Wichita State. And Caleb Daniels had 36 for Tulane. Middle Tennessee over UTEP at 48-47. Middle Tennessee 11-20. UTEP 8-21. Antonio Green had 11 for Middle. Paul Thomas had 14 for UTEP. Furman over Mercer 85-74. Furman 25-6. Mercer 11-20. Jordan Lyons had 25 for Furman, and Jalen Stowe had 16 for Mercer. Mercer fired their coach, by the way. Utah Valley over Cal State Bakersfield 76-61. Utah Valley 23-8. Bakersfield 16-14. Connor Toulson had 22 for Valley. Ricky Holden had 15 for Bakersfield. New Mexico State over Cal Baptist 75-63. New Mexico State 27-4. This is a secret at large team, by the way. 4 losses on the year. This team's incredible. And Cal Baptist 16-14. Trevlin Queen had 19 for New Mexico State, and Dejon Davis had 18 for Baptist. Eastern Washington over Weber State 80-77. Eastern 14-17. Weber 17-14. Mason Petling had 23 for Eastern, and Kobe John had 24 for Weber. Idaho State over Idaho 70-68. Idaho State 11-18. Idaho 5-26. Kelvin Jones had 14 for State. Trevin Allen had 20 for Idaho. Memphis over Tulsa 66-63. Memphis 19-12. Tulsa 18-13. Jeremiah Martin had 20 for Memphis, and Kern Scott had 13 for Tulsa. Omaha over North Dakota 81-76 in the Summit League quarterfinal. Omaha 20-10 and North Dakota 12-18. Zach Jackson had 21 for Omaha, and Marlon Stewart had 26 for North Dakota. Siena over Ryder 87-81 in the Metro Atlantic quarterfinal. Siena 17-15, Ryder 16-15. Evan Fisher had 22 for Siena, and Tyrere Marshall had 22 for Ryder. Pepperdine over San Francisco 89-72 in the West Coast Conference quarterfinal. Pepperdine with the upset win 16-17, San Francisco 21-10. Colby Ross had 26 for Pepperdine, and Charles Minland had 17 for San Francisco. Santa Barbara over Cal Poly 92-82. Santa Barbara 21-9, Cal Poly 6-23. Amadou Sow had 23 for Santa Barbara, and Donovan Fields had 23 for Cal Poly. Oregon over Washington 55-47. Oregon 19-12, Washington 24-7. Peyton Pritchard had 16 for Oregon, and Jalen Nowell had 17 for Washington. Hawaii over Cal Fullerton 71-59. Hawaii 18-12. Fullerton 14-16. Brock Steptoe had 21 for Hawaii, and Jackson Rowe had 16 for Fullerton. Montana over Sacramento State 86-68. Montana 23-8. Sacramento State 14-15. Said Pridgett had 17 for Montana, and Joshua Patton had 20 for Sacramento State. Portland State over Montana State 84-80. Portland State 16-15. Montana State 14-16. Deontay Strickland had 19 for Portland State, and Tyler Hall had 28 for Montana State. Number 17, Nevada over San Diego State 81-53. Nevada 28-3. San Diego State 19-12. Caleb Martin had 25 for Nevada. Jeremy Hemsley had 16 for San Diego State. What am I saying? UC Irvine over Cal State Northridge 86-74. UC Irvine 27-5. Northridge 13-19. Evan Leonard had 17 for UCI, and Lemaine Diane had 33 for Northridge. San Diego upsets BYU 80-57. That's a huge upset in the quarterfinal of the West Coast Conference Tournament. San Diego 21-13, BYU 19-13. Disappointing season for BYU, by the way. Isaiah Pinero had 27 for San Diego, and Ueli Childs had 14 for BYU. And now on the yesterday's results, in which the slate was smaller, obviously. Number 12, Houston over number 20, Cincinnati, 85-69. So Houston wins the AAC title outright, 29-2 on the year. Cincinnati, 25-6. Corey Davis Jr. had 31 for Houston. Jerron Cumberland had 20 for Cincinnati. Penn State over Illinois, 72-56. Penn State, 14-17. Illinois, 11-20. Josh Reeves had 26 for Penn State, and Ayo DeSamu had 16 for Illinois. Indiana over Rutgers 89-73. Indiana 17-14. Rutgers 14-16. Jawan Morgan had 25 for Indiana. Eugene Ayarmre had 18 for Rutgers. CAA quarterfinal, Hofstra over James Madison 76-67. Hofstra 26-6, James Madison 14-19. Justin Wright Foreman had 17 for Hofstra, and Matt Lewis had 23 for James Madison. Colgate over Navy 80-70. Colgate 23-10, Navy 12-19. Rapolis Avanskis had 22 for Colgate, and George Kiernan had 19 for Navy. And that was in the Patriot League semifinal, by the way. Big South Championship, the second auto bid. Gardner Webb with the upset win over Radford, 76-65. So Gardner Webb is in. That is a stunner. I had that team out in the quarterfinal to High Point, I believe, in my predictions. So that was a way off call by me. I obviously thought Campbell would win this because they had the best player in Chris Clemens, but they got upset in the semis. As Gardner Webb punches its ticket to the dance, they're 23-11. Radford finishes 22-11. They'll probably be headed to the NIT. DJ Laster had 32 for Gardner Webb, and Donald Hicks had 17 for Radford. UConn over East Carolina, 82-73. UConn finishes a disappointing regular season at 15-16. East Carolina 10-20. Josh Carlton had 20 for UConn, and Sean Williams had 20 for East Carolina. Nebraska over Iowa 93-91 in overtime. Nebraska 16-15. Iowa 21-10. James Palmer Jr. had 27 for Nebraska, and Luke Garza had 25 for Iowa. Iowa is off to a poor finish this year. Maybe that's a team that gets a surprise double-digit seed that we're not expecting. Patriot League semifinal, Bucknell over Lehigh, 97-75. Bucknell 21-11, Lehigh 20-11. Kimball McKenzie had 25 for Bucknell, and Jordan Cohen had 23 for Lehigh. MVC final, Bradley over Northern Iowa. That was a 5-6 matchup in terms of seeding, 57-54. Northern Iowa had a big lead. They choked it away. It was reminiscent of a little bit of that Texas A&M game in the tournament a few years ago, as Bradley finishes 20-14, UNI 16-18. Yeah, so 18 points down in the second half, and they outscored Northern Iowa 42-27. Elijah Childs led the way with 16, and AJ Green had 23 for UNI. CAA quarterfinal, Delaware over William & Mary, 85-79. Delaware 17-15. William & Mary 14-17. Ithiel Horton had 26 for Delaware, and Justin Pierce had 26 for William & Mary. ASUN final was a phenomenal game. Liberty over Lipscomb 74-68. There was a bad charge call that pretty much swung the game into Liberty's favor. And Scotty James hit a layup with 55.8 seconds left to have Liberty stay the lead the rest of the way. They go into the tournament 28-6, Lipscomb 25-7. Lipscomb's a dark horse to get in at-large, but I think Lipscomb's headed to the NIT. Scotty James had 17 for Liberty, and Garrison Matthews had 21 for Lipscomb. So that's the second year in a row where the 1 seed loses on its home floor in the ASUN title game. Obviously, last year was Florida Gulf Coast. Number 22, Wofford over East Tennessee State, 81-72 in the SoCon semifinal. As Wofford goes to 28-4, East Tennessee State finishes at 24-9. East Tennessee State's a decent team, but they obviously won't make the tournament. Fletcher McGee had 26 for Wofford, and Davian Williamson had 17 for East Tennessee State. SMU over South Florida, 77-71. SMU 14-16. USF 19-12. Ethan Chargnes had 19 for SMU, and Alexis Yetna had 17 for South Florida. Number 21, Wisconsin over Ohio State, 73-67 overtime. Wisconsin had a brutal collapse. Ohio State comes back, forces overtime, but Wisconsin erases the bad collapse and rebounds in overtime and gets the win. They outscore Ohio State 10-4 in the overtime period for the win, 22-9 on the year. Ohio State 18-13. I think Ohio State will still be in the tournament, but I think it'll be either a double-digit seed or maybe a little as a lower single-digit seed, like an 8 or a 9, depending on how it does in the NCAA tournament. Cahill Iverson at 22 for Wisconsin and C.J. Jackson at 22 for Ohio State. Northeastern over UNC Wilmington 80-59, the CAA quarterfinals. Northeastern goes to 21-10, Wilmington 10-23. Jordan Rowland had 21 for Northeastern, and Devontae Kaycock had 21 for Wilmington. Metro Atlantic semifinal, Iona over Siena 73-57. So Iona knocks off Siena on their home floor. Iona 16-15, Siena 17-16. Jalen Pickett had 15 for Siena, and Asante Gist had 22 for Iona. UNC Greensboro over Furman 66-62 in the SoCon semifinal. I thought Furman had a chance at an at-large bid if they had won this game and then lost to Wofford. But now I think UNC Greensboro has a chance to get an at-large bid, depending on how things go this week. They are now 28-5, and Furman drops to 25-7. Francis Alonso had 19 for Greensboro, and Matt Rafferty had 17 for Furman. Summit League quarterfinal, North Dakota State over Oral Roberts, 86-73. North Dakota State 16-15, Oral Roberts 11-21. Tyson Ward had 25 for North Dakota State, and Kevin O'Banner had 23 for Oral Roberts. CAA quarterfinal, Charleston over Drexel 73-61. Charleston 24-8, Drexel 13-19. Grant Riller had 24 for Charleston, and James Butler had 14 for Drexel. Upset in the Metro Atlantic semifinal, Monmouth over Canisius 73-59. So Monmouth in the Metro Atlantic title game for the first time in 3 years. And don't forget, 3 years ago was the year that Monmouth had an at-large case with all those road wins against major conference teams. That those major conference teams turns out to be disappointments, and that's what ultimately cost Monmouth a chance at an at-large. But now they're a win away from getting an auto bid, which would be incredible because they started the year, I believe it was 0-12, and they had a good year within conference play in the Metro Atlantic, and they're on a good run here in the tournament. They're 14-20, and Canisius is 15-17. Dan Hammond had 19 for Monmouth, and Takal Molson had 17 for Canisius, and Purdue Fort Wayne over South Dakota 96-70 in the Summit League quarterfinal. Purdue Fort Wayne 18-14, South Dakota 13-17. Kason Harrell had 21 for Purdue Fort Wayne, and Stanley Amude had 21 for South Dakota. MEAC first round begins tonight. I'm obviously going to do the MEAC Tournament Predictions podcast, and it's going up today. Savannah's a 7-point favorite. Spoiler alert, I think they're going to win and cover. CAA semifinal, Delaware and Hofstra. Hofstra's favored by 10.5. That's a big number, but Hofstra's just way better than Delaware. They'll win and cover. ESPN 7 o'clock, UNC Greensboro against number 20 Wofford. Wofford's a 7-point favorite. I'm taking Wofford to win and cover. They've been great all year long, and they're going to get an auto bid and maybe even a single-digit seed line. Western Illinois, North Dakota State, Summit League semifinal. North Dakota State's a 6.5-point favorite. North Dakota State obviously catches a big break because South Dakota State is out. So that opens up doors for them and a bunch of other teams in that league. I'm taking North Dakota State to win and the cover. Western Michigan and Central Michigan. Central Michigan's a 9-point favorite. It's the MAC first round. Central Michigan's way better than Western Michigan. Western Michigan's arguably the worst team in the MAC this year. So Central Michigan to win and cover in the MAC first tournament, or first round, I should say. Green Bay, Wright State, Horizon League semifinal. Wright State's a 5.5-point favorite. I'm taking Wright to win, but Green Bay to cover. I think Green Bay is a pretty good team in that league. Ball State, Eastern Michigan. Eastern Michigan's -2.5. Tough one here. These two teams are decent. And decent within that league. Not really within the country. I'm going to go with Eastern Michigan. They're very even teams, too. I'm going to take Eastern Michigan to win and cover the 2.5. Miami of Ohio and Akron. Akron's favored by 5.5. This is the MAC first round as well. First round games are at the home campuses of the higher seeds. So in this case, Central Michigan, Eastern Michigan, and Akron are all hosting games tonight. Akron's 5.5-point favorites. I'm going to take Akron to win, but Miami of Ohio to cover. Charleston and Northeastern. Northeastern's favored by 3 in the semifinal. I'm going to take Northeastern to win and barely cover the 3. I could see Northeastern winning this game by 4 or 5 points easily. 9 o'clock ESPN, Pepperdine against number 1 Gonzaga. Gonzaga's a whopping 24-point favorite. Gonzaga's the 1 seed in that conference. Pepperdine's come a long way, pulling off a couple upsets. Their season's going to end tonight. Gonzaga, win, cover, lock it. 9 o'clock ESPN 2, Monmouth and Iona, the Metro Atlantic final. Monmouth is the unexpected team here. I thought Iona would be here because they've been playing the best of the MAC teams of late, MAAC MAC. I'm going to take Iona to win and cover. Nice story, Monmouth, but Iona's just a better team, and they have the better coach in Tim Kluse, and the Gales will go back to the tournament. MAC first round, Ohio and Northern Illinois. Northern Illinois is a 4-point favorite in this game. I'm going to take Northern Illinois to win, but Ohio to cover. I think it's going to be very close. Semifinal in the Horizon League, Oakland and Northern Kentucky. Northern Kentucky is a 5.5-point favorite. They'll roll Oakland. That line's too small. So give me Northern Kentucky to win and cover. Summit League semifinal, Purdue, Fort Wayne, and Omaha. Fort Wayne is a 1-point favorite. I don't get this one at all. And Omaha has just been great this year. Purdue, Fort Wayne's got some buzz. They pulled off some upsets in the past over big-time schools, but Omaha's been really, really good this year. I'm going to take Omaha to win outright here as a 1-point dog. And then 11:30 ESPN2 West Coast Conference semifinals, San Diego, St. Mary's. St. Mary's is only a 5-point favorite. San Diego, this has been a really good run for that team. I think it comes to an end here against a defensive-minded St. Mary's team who some folks think is worthy of an at-large, but I really don't. I just think St. Mary's is better than San Diego, so give me St. Mary's to win and the cover. I'm just going to rip through the NBA and the NHL from the weekend real quick because there's a lot of NFL free agency news that I want to get to on the podcast. So Saturday night NBA and day as well. Kings over Knicks 102-94. Nets over Hawks 114-112. Timberwolves over Wizards 135-130 overtime. Celtics over Lakers 120-107. By the way, LeBron's minutes are going down. So the Lakers looks like they're going to tank. And Brendan Ingram's out for the year. And Lonzo Ball's out for the year as well. Bucks over the Hornets 131-114. Trailblazers over the Suns 127-120. Yesterday, Pistons over the Bulls 131-108. Raptors over the Heat 125-104. 76ers over the Hawks 106-89. Joel Embiid came back for that game. Hawks over the Pelicans 128-116. Grizzlies over the Magic 105-97. Timberwolves over the Knicks 103-92. Rockets over the Mavericks 94-93. Spurs over the Bucks 121-114. Fantastic win for San Antonio. And the Suns over the Warriors 115-111. A huge upset in the NBA. Biggest outright upset in 20 years in the NBA. Tonight, NBA TV, 7 o'clock, Raptors at the Cavs, Kings at the Warriors, 7:30 Pistons at the Nets, 8 o'clock NBA TV, Hornets at the Rockets, 9 o'clock Thunder Jazz, 10:30 NBA TV, Celtics Clippers. So Doc Rivers against his former team. I guess that's the storyline there. NHL. Again, just going to go through scores and preview tonight's slate. Avalanche over Sabres 3-0. Sharks over Blues 3-2 in overtime. Bruins over Senators 3-2. Lightning over Red Wings 3-2. Flyers over Islanders 5-2. Blue Jackets over Penguins 4-1. Maple Leafs over Oilers 3-2. Rangers over Devils 4-2. Hurricanes over Predators 5-3. Blackhawks over Stars 2-1. Coyotes over Kings 4-2. Golden Knights over Canucks 6-2. Yesterday, Panthers over Red Wings 6-1. Capitals over the Jets 3-1. Penguins over the Bruins 4-2 to end the Bruins' amazing 19-game point streak. Flames over Golden Knights 6-3 and the Kings over the Ducks 3-2. Tonight, 7 o'clock, the Lightning at the Maple Leafs, the Blue Jackets at the Islanders, the Senators at the Flyers. 8 o'clock NBCSN, Sharks at the Wild. San Jose is favored. I'm going to take the Sharks here to win. They're just a better team. Erik Karlsson's out and he might be out until the playoffs. But I just think that San Jose wants to win their division and get home ice advantage in the Western Conference playoffs. So give me the San Jose Sharks to win on the road there. Coyotes, Blackhawks at 8:30, 9 o'clock, Hurricanes, Avalanche, and Rangers, Oilers. NFL free agency, big breaking news. Landon Collins to the Redskins, 6 years, $84 million. No wonder the Giants didn't franchise him. He wanted too much money. That's a big overpay for Landon Collins. He's a great player, don't get me wrong, but that's what stupid teams do nowadays, overpay players. And a stupid franchise is the Washington Redskins, who've made mistakes year after year. I'm not saying this is one, but it could be one down the road. But how ironic that Landon Collins stays in the NFC East, and how ironic that the two defensive backs that Dave Gettleman let go, one with the Giants this year with Collins, and then a few years ago back with Carolina with Josh Norman, both end up in Washington. And I've mentioned over and over how Norman's been a bust in Washington. I do not think Collins will be a bust there in the beginning of his contract while he's in his prime. He'll probably make a couple more Pro Bowls unless he gets hurt. But either way, this is a great signing for Washington. This improves their defense. I think the Redskins are a desperate team that wants to, let's face it, win now. I mean, they traded for Case Keenum. And Case Keenum, I don't think is a good quarterback, really, but everybody just loves that great year he had in Minnesota a few years back. But I think Washington's trying. They're seeing that the Giants are really a mess of a franchise right now. They're probably the worst run team in, certainly in New York right now. And that's including the Knicks and the Mets and the Islanders and the Jets. And probably the worst run team in the NFC East, maybe even the NFC. The entire NFL you could even make a case for. And they did make a solid trade with the Browns, the Olivier Vernon for Kevin Ziegler slop, but letting go of Landon Collins for nothing is a black mark on Dave Gettleman's resume for sure. Like I said, Collins will help Washington. Their secondary's improved with this signing. I know they traded for Clinton Dix in the season. They're obviously letting him go, and Clinton Dix will help somebody after he gets paid. And big breaking news, just breaking, Patriots defensive end Trey Flowers intends to sign with Detroit per source from Adam Schefter just now. That's huge. So that means Flowers reunites with Matt Patricia in Detroit, so that makes a lot of sense. There are some people speculating that he'd go to New York, to the Giants or the Jets, but that didn't work out. Obviously, Antonio Brown, that's a big story that happened late Saturday night. He was traded from the Pittsburgh Steelers to the Oakland Raiders for a third-round, fifth-round pick. That is a huge win for Oakland. They don't have to give up one of their firsts for Brown, who's still in his prime. And I think this is a big black mark on Kevin Colbert's resume as Pittsburgh GM, not getting enough in return for arguably the best wide receiver in the NFL. So that's a bad job by the Steelers, who might be a last-place team next year without Brown and without Bell, who's going to leave and sign with somebody, whether it's the Jets or the Colts or Houston. Tampa Bay's a dark horse. Someone threw Oakland out there. And one more big signing by Oakland. Trent Brown went to Oakland, 4 years, $66 million. He becomes the highest paid offensive lineman in NFL history. That is a rich deal for Brown, who will help the Raiders' offensive line, will help Derek Carr, help their running game. Maybe Le'Veon Bell is next for them. We'll see. It's going to be very interesting. But the Raiders have to address their defense, which they don't have any right now. They probably have the worst defense in the NFL right now without Khalil Mack there, obviously. So they have to address those needs. So maybe they'll do that in the draft. But that's going to be very interesting to see what else happens. So the Flowers to Detroit is happening. Tight end CJ Uzuma heading back to the Bengals, 3 years, $18 million. But Collins is 6 years, $84 million with $45 million guarantee. That is such a big overpay for Collins. Odell Beckham Jr. has been rumored to be had in a trade, despite Dave Gettleman over and over and over again intending out there that he didn't sign him to trade him. But I'm going to have his word until Adam Schefter, Ian Rappaport says that Odell Beckham Jr. is available for trade, because I haven't heard one of those guys say it. Matt Miller of Bleacher Report is hearing that an Odell trade to the 49ers is still possible. If I'm the Giants, I am asking for the number 2 pick, because I think it's an absolute disgrace if they don't get a first-round pick from a dysfunctional team like the 49ers, especially a dumb franchise like the 49ers. I mean, yeah, it looked like they got their franchise guy with Jimmy Garoppolo and that robbery of a trade from the Patriots, which looked like a robbery. It might not be now after the ACL injury. So you never know. But if I'm the Giants, I'd beg for the number 2 pick, or else you just hang up the phone. And then you're guaranteed to get a quarterback from the draft, and you don't have to trade for Josh Rosen. So a lot of other free agents still on the board. Obviously, Le'Veon Bell's the big one. Maybe we'll hear more about him coming up. C.J. Mosley's still on the board. Kwan Alexander signed with the Redskins, 4 years, $55 million. No, I'm sorry, the 49ers. I have Redskins in my head because we're talking about Collins. But Kwan Alexander to the 49ers is a big signing for them. He upgrades the linebacking core there. Flowers to Detroit makes a lot of sense because of Patricia. Collins was linked to Washington, so that's not surprising. The Eagles are signing Malik Jackson, 3 years, $30 million. That's an upgrade to their defensive line. And the Raiders, I talked about how they signed Trent Brown before. They actually cleared cap space by trading Kelechi Assembly to the Jets for, I believe, a 5th-round pick. That's a great trade for the Jets. He upgrades their offensive line. That was a huge need for them. Sam Darnold needs protection, and now he needs weapons. And then it's put up or shut up for the number 3 overall pick in the 2018 draft, Sam Darnold. So that was a big trade that happened over the weekend in the NFL. Deshaun Jackson's getting released from the Bucs in all likelihood. He thanked his goodbye on Instagram and Twitter, but the Bucs haven't announced that he was being released yet, but it sure looks like that's going to happen. Earl Thomas is still on the board. So you have a lot of guys still on the board. So I am very fascinated to see what plays out, who gets traded, where all these other guys go. There's still a ton of guys out there. We talked about Collins and Flowers signing within the last hour. You still have Anthony Barr out there from the Vikings. And speaking of the Vikings, teams were checking on them to see if they would trade Xavier Rhodes or Trey Waynes, because they have a plethora of cornerbacks, and the cornerback market is weak. So that was wise of some teams to reach out to Minnesota. But I don't know if Minnesota would do that, but maybe they will, to clear some cap space to make upgrades at their offensive line, which they need to do. So that would be kind of a wise move to to do that. The Giants re-signed Spencer Pulley to a 3-year deal. He was a restricted free agent. He helped their offensive line a little bit, created holes for Saquon Barkley. So that unit looks to be one of the more improved units after they get Ziegler in the Vernon trade. So that's that. We'll see what happens within the next 24 hours, and obviously we'll go over anything that happens then. Before I go, best bet brought to you by FanDuel. My best bets haven't been working out lately because big favorites have been losing outright. If I did a podcast yesterday, I would have obviously lost because the Golden State Warriors were a no-brainer to be on that list, and they had no business losing to the Phoenix Suns, whether Kevin Durant was injured or not. So that is very, very bad for the Warriors, as I mentioned before. So here we go. Let's go with the Toronto Raptors, the Houston Rockets, and that's just NBA. In college, we'll go with Hofstra. We'll go with Central Michigan. Gonzaga's too big of a favorite to put on there, so that stinks. And then let's go to the NHL for some. Philly's a big favorite over Ottawa. We'll take them. So that's 5 teams. About 2-1 odds. We'll wager $1. Payout of $2.93. Couple money line picks. College basketball. I pretty much picked all the games because they're conference tournaments. If I had to bet on one to be certain to win outright in terms of an underdog, this is tough because I think I picked all the favorites. I guess Omaha, even though that they're a 1-point dog, that's who I would take. But if I had to go against one of my picks and just to suggest it, I'm not obviously changing my pick, but if I had to make a pick for an underdog, I'd make a case for Charleston over Northeastern in the CIA semifinal. And in the NBA, my moneyline pick is going to be, I'm going to go with the Detroit Pistons in Brooklyn against the Nets. I like that one a lot. The Clippers make a lot of sense. The Thunder make a lot of sense, especially if George is playing. But I'm going to go with Detroit over the Nets because I don't like how Brooklyn's played, even though they won their last few games, but they're against bad teams like the Cavs and whatnot. So let's go with Detroit, who is in the mix for the bottom 3 seeds in the East. So that's a wise pick. So that's it for today. I'll be back tomorrow recapping college basketball, NBA, NHL, free agency. Obviously, I have my best bet. If I have time tomorrow, I'll talk a little spring training. And I hope you guys have a great day, everybody.